You might know them for their red carpet glamour, blockbuster roles, and magazine covers, but what if I told you that right now, 11 once famous actresses are not living in mansions or luxury hotels? They're rotting behind prison walls. From fraud and drug charges to violent scandals and jaw-dropping betrayals, their fall from grace is more dramatic than any movie they've ever starred in. These aren't Hollywood scripts. This is their real life. Buckle up, because today we're exposing 11 actresses currently locked up and the shocking reasons why they ended up there. Skylar Julius de Leon. Once upon a time, there was a couple named Thomas and Jackie Hawks. They owned a modest but impressive yacht called the Well-Deserved, a vessel with a 2,500-mile range, staterooms, and enough amenities to make life at sea comfortable. But after years of living a nomadic lifestyle, the Hawks were ready to settle down. They wanted to sell the boat for around $440,000, buy a house near their grandchild, and finally enjoy a life where the only thing growing was flowers, not waves. When the ad went out, Skylar de Leon came calling. Claiming to be a former child actor who had wisely invested her earnings in real estate, Skylar offered to buy the yacht. With her pregnant wife by her side, she convinced the cautious Hawks that they should take the boat out for a sea trial before sealing the deal. On the day of the test sale, Thomas and Jackie joined Skylar and two of her friends aboard the Well-Deserved. They were never seen again. What really happened was chilling. Skylar and her accomplices attacked the couple, forcing them to reveal their bank information and sign over ownership of the yacht. Then, in a horrifying act, they were thrown overboard to their deaths. With the Hawks gone, Skylar boldly bragged that the boat was hers, even flashing paperwork to investigators. But police weren't buying it. They pressed one of Skylar's partners in crime, who cracked under pressure, fled to Mexico, and later returned to confess everything, providing prosecutors with all the evidence they needed. The fallout was brutal. Skylar's wife received 2 life sentences without parole. Skylar herself, already described as a manipulative pathological liar, was convicted not only of the Hawks murders but of another killing as well. In 2019, after legally changing gender to female, she claimed the motive behind the killings was to pay for gender reassignment surgery. But the evidence was overwhelming. Her lawyer barely mounted a defense. By April 2009, Skylar de Leon was sentenced to death and now sits on death row at San Quentin. And if you thought that story was shocking, just wait until you hear how Amber Heard narrowly survived prison life. Stick around, hit that subscribe button, and don't miss the next unbelievable chapter in the world of true crime and celebrity scandal. Shannon Richardson's so-called claim to fame was barely more than a cameo, an extra in a few episodes of The Walking Dead. But while the show was fiction, Shannon seemed to have a real obsession with death and destruction. By 2013, she was in the middle of a bitter divorce from her third husband, and instead of settling her scores the usual way, through court filings or some petty revenge, she chose a path straight out of a nightmare. Shannon hatched a scheme to frame her estranged husband by making it look like he had mailed ricin-laced letters threatening then-President Barack Obama, New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, and even a non-profit official. At first, it almost worked. The unsuspecting Army veteran was hauled in and grilled so hard you'd think he was the Thanksgiving turkey. But he refused to break, swearing up and down that he was innocent. That's when investigators shifted the spotlight to Shannon. One piece of incriminating evidence after another began piling up, and her story collapsed under the weight of her own lies. First, she claimed her husband had forced her to send the letters. But under pressure, she cracked and confessed. In June 2013, she was indicted, and by November she signed a plea deal to avoid charges that could have locked her away for life. The following year, she was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, slapped with a $67,200 fine, and placed under 5 years of supervised release. Her projected release date? November 2028. By then, who knows? If the zombie apocalypse really does come, Shannon Richardson, with her brief walk-on role in The Walking Dead, might feel eerily at home. Zara Pythian.in 2015, Zara Pythian, once known as a stuntwoman and rising actress, found her name forever tainted by scandal. Alongside her husband, she was convicted of the sexual abuse of underage girls, crimes that spanned from 2005 to 2008. Together, the pair faced 14 charges that painted a chilling picture of manipulation and betrayal. During sentencing, the court branded Zara's husband as the ringleader, yet held Zara equally responsible, calling her blind devotion to him the reason she stood accused at all. At 37 years old, she was no naive girl, but a woman who, according to the judge, chose loyalty over morality. From the very beginning, Zara denied everything. When first arrested, she dismissed the allegations as nonsense, and even throughout the trial she clung to her innocence despite overwhelming testimony against her. The victim's impact statements revealed the devastating aftermath. One woman said her childhood had been stolen, leaving her unable to form genuine relationships. Another described how the revelation shattered her mother's spirit beyond repair. Once a woman who made a living fighting on screen, Zara's real fight was now behind prison walls. At sentencing, she even managed to flash a smile and wave to supporters shouting encouragement from the gallery, as if unfazed by the weight of her crimes. Today, instead of film sets, she's found a new stage, Foston Hall Prison in Derbyshire, where she's taken up industrial cleaning courses, determined to keep her surroundings spotless. Ironically, the woman once celebrated for her daring stunts may now leave prison not as an actress, but as one of Britain's most skilled cleaners. Jen Shah burst onto Bravo's Real Housewives of Salt Lake City in 2020, selling herself as a glamorous businesswoman with a dazzling empire. When asked what exactly she did for a living, she confidently declared, "I own 3 different marketing companies. We do lead generation, data monetization, and customer acquisition. I'm basically the Wizard of Oz, the one behind the curtain making everything happen. You know those ads that pop up right when you're shopping online? That's me. Every time you click, I get paid." She boasted of finding her niche in direct response marketing, so successful, she claimed, that it allowed her to invest in fashion, skincare, lashes, and a variety of ventures. To the world, Jen Shah was the picture of hustle, glam, and self-made wealth. But behind the curtain was a very different story. In March 2021, Shah and her longtime assistant, Stuart Smith, both frequent faces on the show, were arrested in a shocking federal sweep. Prosecutors accused them of running a nationwide telemarketing scheme that targeted hundreds of unsuspecting victims, many of them elderly. From 2012 onward, Shah and her team allegedly lured people with promises of online business opportunities, only to sell them overpriced and worthless services, sometimes even website packages to seniors who didn't own computers. Worse, investigators said Shah and Smith sold victim lead lists to other scammers, draining bank accounts until many had nothing left. Manhattan U.S. Attorney Audrey Strauss put it bluntly, these so-called business opportunities were nothing more than fraudulent schemes motivated by greed to steal victims' money. For years, that stolen money funded Shah's lavish lifestyle and over-the-top persona on reality TV. But the illusion came crashing down. Though she first proclaimed her innocence, going so far as to say, "I got played by Stuart, I wouldn't be in this at all if not for him," the walls closed in. Facing decades in prison, Jen Shah finally pleaded guilty to wire fraud. In January 2023, the reality star who once flaunted her wealth on television was sentenced to 6 years and 6 months behind bars. Just months later, she turned 50, not in a sprawling mansion, but behind prison walls. From Wizard of Oz mogul to convicted fraudster, Jen Shah's rise and fall is one of the most jaw-dropping scandals reality TV has ever seen. Amy Locane. On the night of June 27, 2010, actress Amy Locane made a choice that would shatter lives forever. Drunk and driving nearly twice the legal speed limit, she barreled down the road toward home, until she slammed into a car turning into a driveway. The crash hurled her into a drainage ditch, leaving her only slightly injured. But the other car wasn't so fortunate. The passenger was killed instantly, and the driver was left clinging to life. When police and emergency crews arrived, they found Amy giggling, too intoxicated to grasp the devastation she had caused, too far gone to realize her life had just taken a turn she could never undo. For the family who had just lost their wife and mother, the nightmare was only beginning. In December 2010, Amy was indicted for vehicular assault and aggravated manslaughter. 2 years later, A jury convicted her of vehicular homicide and assault by auto. The sentence? Just 3 years in prison. A punishment that left the victim's family in tears, horrified at what they saw as a slap on the wrist. Amy served her time, was paroled in 2015, and was promptly served divorce papers. But the story didn't end there. In 2016, an appeals court ruled her sentence far too lenient. By February 2019, it was increased to 5 years. Then in September 2020, after years of legal battles and courtroom drama, Amy Locane was resentenced yet again, this time to 8 years behind bars. And that's where she remains today, a fallen star whose tragic choices turned her name from Hollywood promise to a cautionary tale of recklessness, privilege, and justice delayed. Julie and Todd Crisley died in June 2022. Julie and Todd Crisley, stars of Crisley Knows Best, watched their carefully crafted empire crumble. A jury found them guilty of tax evasion and of securing more than $30 million in fraudulent bank loans, money that didn't go toward investments or philanthropy but instead financed a lavish lifestyle designed to dazzle and intimidate everyone around them. The couple had been indicted back in 2019 on charges of conspiracy, bank fraud, wire fraud, and tax evasion. By November 2022, the hammer fell. Julie was sentenced to 7 years in prison, while Todd received 12. Shock and disbelief washed over them as reality set in. Prison, not prime time, was in their future. Appeals were promised, but USA Network swiftly pulled the plug on Crisley Knows Best and its spin-offs, leaving producers furious after being assured for years that the family was innocent. Adding fuel to the fire, prosecutors revealed that Todd's 77-year-old mother had committed perjury during sentencing, allegedly at the couple's urging, in a desperate attempt to sway the court. To prosecutors, the Crisleys weren't misunderstood celebrities, they were a walking crime wave, professional swindlers who cheated banks, dodged taxes, and stiffed vendors at every turn. Julie even attempted to convince the judge to let her serve her time at home, arguing her 10-year-old adopted daughter might not survive without her. The plea fell flat. Instead of owning their crimes, the Crisleys painted themselves as martyrs, sacrificial lambs, as they called it, claiming they were targeted only because of their fame. In a statement to the press, Todd and Julie leaned on their faith, accused the government of lying, blamed their accountants, and insisted their trial was riddled with errors. Meanwhile, their social media feeds became a swirl of cryptic, self-pitying posts, a final attempt to control the narrative as their empire collapsed around them. Tammy Lynn Aswage, better known as WWE's very first diva, should have been remembered for breaking barriers in wrestling. Instead, her legacy spiraled into one of the most notorious downfalls in sports entertainment history. Back in 2012, Tammy seemed less focused on her career and more intent on running into trouble. Incredibly, she was arrested 5 times in a single month for offenses ranging from violating a protective order to burglary. Those charges earned her 114 days behind bars, and by May 2013, she was out again, temporarily calmer, but far from reformed. By 2015, Tammy's demons caught up with her once more. Within 2 months, she was arrested 3 times in Pennsylvania for driving drunk. Though she pled guilty and received a 90-day sentence, she served it in rehab. Yet probation violations landed her right back in jail until 2017. Just a year later, she was once again busted twice for DUIs and accused of fleeing the scene of an accident. When she skipped a court date in 2018, authorities arrested her for contempt and fugitive charges. What followed was a dizzying cycle of paroles, bench warrants, revoked freedom, and multiple state transfers, leaving her stuck behind bars on and off for years. In July 2020, trouble struck again. Tammy was arrested for driving with a suspended license, fleeing police, and violating a restraining order. Though she gained freedom in mid-2021, her life continued to unravel. By January 2022, she was arrested in New Jersey for threatening an intimate partner with scissors, an offense that alone could bring 11 years in prison. Barely a month later, she was again caught driving drunk, racking up 11 fresh charges. Then came the tragedy that would define her downfall. In March 2022, high on alcohol and speed, Tammy slammed into another car, killing a 75-year-old man. Her blood alcohol level was more than 3 times the legal limit. Initially released on bail, she was soon declared too dangerous and returned to jail. Now facing DUI manslaughter charges that could lock her away for 26 years, Tammy stands as a cautionary tale, a superstar who blazed trails in WWE only to burn it all down with addiction, crime, and self-destruction. Abby Lee Miller, the fiery star of Dance Moms, has lived a life almost as dramatic off-screen as on. While she isn't behind bars today, her past includes a very real prison sentence. Back in 2010, Miller filed for bankruptcy, owing nearly $500,000 in unpaid taxes. But fate took a sharp turn when Dance Moms came calling. Almost overnight, she was raking in fortunes from the hit show, her master classes, and merchandise. The problem? She forgot to share her windfall with the taxman or the bankruptcy court. Instead, Miller opened secret bank accounts to hide her earnings and even went as far as having friends smuggle $120,000 in cash from an Australian masterclass, an outrageous violation of customs and immigration laws. Her reckless actions caught up with her, leading to 20 federal indictments for fraud, concealment of assets, and false declarations. In 2016, she struck a guilty plea deal, hoping for leniency. The following year, justice was served. Abby was sentenced to 1 year and a day in prison, fined $440,000, ordered to pay an additional $12,000 judgment, and even required to submit her DNA sample. Yet, in true reality TV fashion, her story came with a twist. Thanks to good behavior, Miller served just 8 months before walking free. Allison Mack is another Hollywood star who fell from grace, and fast. Back in 2006, audiences adored her. As Chloe Sullivan on Smallville, she wasn't just a fan favorite, she was arguably the heartbeat of the show, which ran from 2001 to 2011. But while the world saw a rising star, Allison was secretly searching for something darker. That same year, she crossed paths with NXIVM, a so-called self-help group that would later be exposed as a dangerous cult. By 2015, Mack wasn't just a follower, she was running one of its most sinister subgroups. She lured in new slaves for the cult's leader, gathered blackmail material, seized control of their assets, and even oversaw a horrific branding ritual. Victims were pinned to the floor, burned with the founder's initials, while Mack reportedly shouted, "Feel the pain. Feel the love." Each branding lasted up to 30 agonizing minutes. The FBI saw it differently. In 2018, they arrested Mack on charges of sex trafficking and forced labor. Facing a possible 15-year-to-life sentence, and with no Superman to swoop in and save her, Mack struck a deal. She flipped on NXIVM's founder, Keith Raniere, helping prosecutors secure his jaw-dropping 120-year prison sentence in 2020. Her cooperation spared her the harshest punishment. In June 2021, Mack was sentenced to just 3 years in prison, fined $20,000, and placed on probation. In reality, she served only 2 years. By July 2023, she walked free, a chilling reminder of how a once-beloved TV star became one of Hollywood's most shocking cautionary tales. In 2015, Amber Heard was still deeply in love with Johnny Depp, so much so that she could hardly stand being apart from him. When Johnny flew to Australia to film Pirates of the Caribbean, Amber decided she couldn't take the distance anymore. She packed her bags for a surprise visit. But she didn't travel alone. Her 2 beloved Yorkshire Terriers came along for the ride. There was just one problem. Australia has some of the strictest animal quarantine laws in the world. Pets entering the country need permits and must undergo 2 weeks of quarantine. Breaking those rules carried harsh penalties, up to 10 years in prison and a $75,000 fine. Instead of following procedure, Amber smuggled the dogs into the country. The secret unraveled quickly. She took the dogs to a groomer, and word spread like wildfire. Soon, social media erupted, and the Australian Agriculture Minister went so far as to threaten to have the dogs put down. In a panic, Johnny and Amber rushed their pets back to the United States and issued a stiff, awkward apology in a YouTube video that instantly went viral. Amber later pled guilty to falsifying travel documents and was given a $1,000 fine, on the condition she stayed out of trouble in Australia. The scandal faded until 2020. That year, during Johnny Depp's London court case, a former employee testified that Amber had been explicitly warned she couldn't take the dogs to Australia. Worse, he alleged she pressured an employee to take the blame when authorities caught on. This explosive claim triggered a perjury investigation by Australian authorities. For a moment, it looked like the smuggling saga would come back to haunt her. But 2 months ago, officials quietly announced they would not pursue charges. Martha Stewart may not have stepped inside a jail cell for nearly 20 years, but her infamous scandal still lands her on this list. It all began in December 2001, when Stewart sold off her stock in a company just 1 day before its value plummeted by 16%. Authorities later discovered she had received a tip from her broker at Merrill Lynch, a move they interpreted as insider trading. By June 2003, Stewart was indicted by a grand jury on charges of obstructing justice and securities fraud. Less than a year later, in March 2004, the lifestyle queen was found guilty of lying to federal investigators. The sentence? 5 months in a federal penitentiary, a $30,000 fine, and later, nearly $200,000 in civil penalties from the SEC. To top it off, she was banned for 5 years from serving as director, CEO, or CFO of any public company. Years later, in a 2017 podcast, Stewart opened up about her time behind bars. It was horrifying, and no one should have to go through that kind of indignity, except for murderers and maybe a few others, she confessed. It's a very, very awful thing. And if you think her story is shocking, wait until you see the 17 actors who are currently wasting away in prison, and the jaw-dropping reasons why. Click here and I'll see you there.